I don't think we can disregard the power of the web to just be telegraphic and newspaper. Maybe there's no such thing as a perfect experience, right? Everything is how you feel at the time. Like sometimes I feel like watching a 3-hour movie. Sometimes I feel like watching a 5-minute short. And the web doesn't know. It's interactive. You have multimedia, you have editorial, you have all the ingredients to make a great experience. But maybe what it fails to understand is your context, right? Like somebody goes like, oh, I want to see this calendar app. Oh my God, now I have to scroll through all these like animations, right? Or you could be, oh, I want to see this calendar app. Whoa, look at this. I totally get the product now. This is what they're trying to do. And this website just communicated it perfectly.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? I'm Britton Stepedic, and this is Low Key Legends, the show where I sit down with creative legends to fish out nuggets of wisdom that you can take away on your creative journey. Today, I'm joined across the screen by Claudio Guglieri, the designer, creative director, and speaker. He is currently head of design at Opal Cameras, but in the past, he's worked with Fantasy, Be Real, Elephant, Huge. Without further ado, Claudio, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be able to talk to you, and thank you for having me and just spending this time with me.
So I've chatted with, on and offline, dozens and dozens of designers, older, younger, creative professionals. And many of them I've mentioned that we're having this chat, and they've only had amazing things to say about you. So it just goes to show that you've made such a beautiful creative impact on the industry. So a huge shout out to you and the work that you've done.
That's amazing. Yeah, that feels good. Thank you so much. I'm overwhelmed by that. Like, we're so lucky to have this job, like we get to sit down and do what we like and imagine things and try things out. So it feels good when you feel appreciated, of course.
Yeah, and it really is a beautiful job. And I found that almost as a through line with creatives that I've spoken with, is that they have an emphasis on the power of play and just this creative expression that we can take and put into our work. And I wanted to start almost in an unconventional place with just asking you about what is the power of play and how do you think about play inside of your creative work on a day-to-day basis?
The way I think about the job, and probably many jobs are like this, is it's not just unique to design. It's that we are creating things, right? In the business of creating things, there's a lot that needs to be invented, and then there's a lot of production work, right? I would say in one hand, nobody enjoys talking about the production work, but actually maybe in the past 10 years, everybody's talking about the production work, design systems, etc., etc. On the initial part of like inventing, I guess that's what you're referring with the power of play. It's all about like, let your mind wander and like, to some extent, put something together that doesn't there's a mix between, in my mind, let your mind wander and try to do things that maybe you haven't done before. But then it comes through this filter of like, is this compelling? Like, is this, even the execution of it, is this good? Because I could make things that look like a 5-year-old did it, but they still look like a 5-year-old did it. So how do you bring to the, unfiltered raw creativity, the filter of experience and everything you've seen, and package it in a way that it still feels fresh but proper? I think that's what I struggle sometimes myself. Like I may come up with something, but it doesn't pass the filter of, is this professional looking? So it's a tension, I would say. Where one needs to go hand in hand by the other. If you go too free on, the power of play, you might get raw creative amazingness that just looks horrible and feels horrible,
I guess that's true in both directions. If you go too playful, it might look horrible. And then if you go too professional, it may just be boring and it doesn't have the right balance.
Right. It's 100%. Sometimes if you go, sometimes it's easy to go like all professional, as you said, but then you know, you take a step back and it's like, well, is this really the brand? It's like I work with well, I know you talked to Brian Powell. I share sometime working with him at Finance Interactive, and we both work under Anton Reponen. And Reponen, he always had this thing that I love. It's like if you cover the logo in your comp, does it still feel like the brand? So let's pretend I make an app for Bank of America, and I'm looking at my phone. I cover the Bank of America logo. Does that still feel like Bank of America? And if it doesn't, if you could change the logo for a different logo, then you haven't done the job, you know. Then it's just like one more template. So yeah, it's a balance. It's hard. I don't, you know, 20 years in, I still don't get it. Don't always get it. Hopefully I get it sometimes.
Doing this for 20 years, I think it's the perfect opportunity to dive in and learn how you've been able to try and stay creative and executing at such a high level over the course of that period of time. And I know you just said, I don't know exactly how it works in the breadth of creativity, but I think we can kind of explore and dive in together. So that's what I'd like to try and analyze over the course of our conversation. But let's do a radically hard pivot and talk about what was the first video game that changed your life?
Oh, I love this. This is great. Okay. The first video game that changed my life, and it gave me such a rush that I felt like my heart was beating faster. The music, the vibe, I still remember the smell of it. It's called Final Fight. Final Fight is a Capcom game, you know, might come maybe a few years before Street Fighter 2. And, you know, you basically, I think the genre is called beat 'em up, where you just go in the streets and like you go beating everybody up. And the sound and the animation, I was in, it was the weekend. I was with my father in some sort of bar or restaurant, and the machine was in the background, and I approached it. Some people were playing. I heard the music. I heard the impact of the sound effects, and it just gave me a rush. I was like, oh my God, what is this? You know, this kind of thing, the feeling when you, and then I play, of course. And when you finish playing and you're still kind of like shaky, you're like, whoa, that was amazing. What happened? That feeling. I mean, damn, if I could create, you know, that a portion of that feeling in anybody through my work, that would be amazing. That would be incredible.
Say, is that something that you still, that essence, that capturing of that raw emotion, is that something you still try to achieve with your work on a day-to-day basis, trying to make people feel?
That's the idea. I think, you know, just having this conversation is weird because I wasn't expecting that question, but it's almost like a refresher. Like I feel like every once in a while you need to like forget about, you know, the layers of complexity and like the to-dos and be like, why am I doing this? What's the feeling I'm chasing, right? There's this talk by who's this guy? Chris Milk, the director. He did a few projects like the Johnny Cash project and whatnot. He has a TED talk, which is one of my favorite talks in the whole world, where he talks about VR, the power of VR, and he compares the power of VR to the same feeling he got when he listened to music, to the Beatles on headphones for the first time. And like how he was like as a kid, you see a photo, he's like, and he said like, I'm chasing that feeling. I'm chasing the power to create that feeling in other people. And VR might be the thing. I don't know. But yeah, that would be great. I think when I take all the complexity and like, what is the message? What is the brand? What are we trying to sell? Yeah, that's the idea. That truly is the idea. Britton, I wanted to ask you, what about you? Do you have any game that you can go back to?
It has to be Final Fantasy VII. That game and the storytelling is so impactful, and I thought it was so well done. So from the perspective of the team building of trying to get your characters to beat the final boss and kill Sephiroth, but also just like the cinematic experiences, the act of like the fact that the CD pack was 4 or 5 discs and you had to constantly change it out when you got to the next stage of the game, I thought that was really exciting too, because it's like, oh, I want to make sure that I get through this game, but it's huge. At the time, it was huge. Unlike games today where you can, play for like 200 hours on like Skyrim or something that people are doing. But the fact that it was all those discs made it seem like this task in itself that you had to accomplish. So I think from the cinematic aspect of the design to the storytelling to the sound design to the music, everything just became something that really sticks in my memory. And I remember just like mainly I was watching my brother play it, but like sitting around for hours watching your older brother play a video game and being hooked the whole time and getting to play a little bit on your own, especially in adulthood now. I just find it like a magical experience.
Yeah, the couch experience in video games, like, is it fun to play one, and then is it fun to watch? That is so important. I do remember Final Fantasy. I don't know if this is something you remember. To me, I remember this memory. I have this memory of like trying to cross this bridge, and I crossed this bridge 100 times, and sometimes you will get no battles, and sometimes you will get interrupted like 20 times. And I was really just trying to cross it. I was in a rush, like, come on, I just want to get there. And I got stopped like 5 times in this bridge with a random battle. I'm like, oh my God, this game is killing me. That's the one aspect that I didn't enjoy. It wasn't even established. It was just purely random. And you just had to go through it,
I think the grinding in like RPGs is maybe a pretty maddening experience. When you can't like choose to interact with battles. Maybe that's why game designers figured that out, how utterly obnoxious it is. And now you can kind of like run into encounters, I guess, in games.
Right. Yeah, man, different times. Great character design.
Yeah.
That was, I would say, of all the Final Fantasies, that's the one.
And
the movies were great. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I guess it kind of connecting full circle. I think like that touches to what we were talking about with like the power of play, tapping into like emotion for emotion's sake to connect to people. I think that's really what we're trying to do with branding, with digital experiences. And I guess my first moment with like falling in love with like a digital experience was probably going on to awards and like seeing the culmination of sound design with motion, with interactivity, and how all of these things could create a world opposed to just like a piece of, I guess, like marketing. It became so much more than that. And I think that as time goes on, I'm more receptive to those type of experiences and trying to create things that are more like that type of experience than just trying to create a landing page for X company that achieves one goal. How can I put an emotional spin on that in order to capture some sort of emotion?
That's so I don't know if you've been following the debate online. Who's this guy? Well, it's actually a somehow famous in the community designer, Brian Lovin. He was mentioning on the release of this calendar app called Amy, right? He's like, his point was like, I don't know why these landing pages are like so convoluted and they have like so many things, and I would rather have a simple, get the point across kind of page. And I was thinking about that. It's like, well, yeah, it really depends. I don't think we can disregard the power of the web to just be telegraphic and newspaper, like maybe the perfect experience doesn't, maybe there's no such thing as a perfect experience, right? Everything is how you feel at the time. Like sometimes I feel like watching a 3-hour movie. Sometimes I feel like watching a 5-minute short. And the web doesn't know. But yeah, it's, as you said, is interactive. You have multimedia, you have editorial, you have all the ingredients to make a great experience. But maybe what it fails to understand is your context, right? Like somebody goes like, oh, I want to see this calendar app. Oh my God, now I have to scroll through all this like animations, right? Or you could be, oh, I want to see this calendar app. Whoa, look at this. I totally get the product now. This is what they're trying to do. And this website just communicated it perfectly. Um, I don't know. I don't know the answer, but I feel like this, you always have to make an assumption, right? Like, what kind of experience do I think is right for this product? Maybe we should ask. It's like, you want to watch a video? You want to read this short email, or do you want to get into a whole story? You know?
That's so funny. That's probably maybe that's the future. Is like, what mood are you in? We can give you information in any form.
Yeah. What kind of internet do you want to experience? Are you in for the story, or just, give me 3 value props and a download link?
That's so true. And I guess like one is kind of determined by the studio, the agency, the internal team, and also kind of the founder as well. So, I mean, a founder or a marketing team will come to an agency or a freelancer, insert group here, and you're kind of working in tandem as a culmination, as a partnership to create something that you believe is the best product experience brand for the audience. So, I mean, it may be even determined by the audience. If the audience is all like get shit done people who are trying to optimize time, maybe the site experience should be like a simple landing page with kind of like a more editorial or content driven style. And then if it's for a different audience or a different founder, they may want to kind of communicate in a different way. I think that's where like these things can kind of cross into different paths. I think like there's no right or wrong answer. It really is like, what do you think is cool? And then also, what do you think is effective? And is there a balance between the two?
Yeah, I'm in the arduous process of redoing my portfolio now, and which is, I think everybody can relate to. And I'm going through that mental journey. Well, first of all, like, I haven't updated my portfolio in like a year, and like I did it in ReadyMag, which is a great platform. I've been using it for like 7 years, but now I was like, I just wanted to try new things. So it's almost an excuse for me to also learn more Framer. And yeah, like the mental journey I go through every night when I go into it, I'm like, what am I doing here? Who is this for? Is this for me? Is this for people to like see the work and enjoy it, or is it for recruiters? Am I looking for a job? Is that why am I doing it? It's not the case, but I'm landing in like, I think it's just for me. And if you happen to come to this website and you and I have some sort of like connection and you can see that, then you might enjoy it. But if you come to this website waiting for download resume and please hire me, which again is not the case, then we're not going to connect.
I am a big fan of using your portfolio for whatever the hell you want, whatever your goal is. That's probably like another project that you can kind of like slide into your, I guess, like portfolio archive as well, just to use it as whatever tool you want. And
you could put your portfolio in your portfolio.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I did that. Check.
Done. But I think we have to dive in a little bit and get a more full picture of you, Claudio. So early life, you grew up in Spain. What was opportunities like as a young designer in Spain? Where did you grow up, and how did your environment shape your perspective on design?
All right. So yeah, I was born and raised in Spain. I had my first like 3 jobs in Spain. I guess kind of like a little bit corny to talk about when I was a kid, but as a kid, the internet wasn't there yet, so like I'm lucky to be part of this generation of change. There was no endless streaming services, there was no endless video games or entertaining, so there's a lot of moments of in between. And I think kids during born in the 80s, whatever, like those in between moments are the moments that define you the most, because you had to choose what to do. while you're waiting for something to happen, or you're just there, summers, long summers, doing nothing. Um, and that is, that ability to get bored, it's almost like what I don't have now as an adult, right? Like the ability to like think about stuff and like wonder mentally. So the in-between moments define a little bit like what ended up being my job, and that is, started comics, drawing a lot, copying anime that I like, drawing my own things. um, Eventually, getting to know like some basic tools of like typography on a really old computer, and printing it out and be like, whoa, this can be a thing in the wall. I just made this and people can see it. Then computers came, and it started like uh, all this like um, piracy CDs full of games. So you're like, oh, I'm gonna make a cover for this CD. You get this game from a friend. Oh, I'm gonna make a theme for this. Then you start like almost like customizing your experience. Uh,
Mhm.
and I guess from there, like things turn into video game as well. Like the web kind of like appear and mature a little bit. Flash came up, and you're like, wait, I can actually create things and interactions that go beyond a blue link. And kind of like something sparked my brain, and I thought this could be a thing. But I never, kids don't think, oh, this is going to be my job. You just do it. And I did a bunch of websites for friends. um, I had this friend who had a heavy metal band. So did the whole photo shoot, did the website, did the logo, did the CD cover. Um, and some of them are still using those photos. I'm like, guys, it's been a while. We should make another photo shoot. Um, so yeah, like that, to be able to shape the whole package, you have a lot of respect for established, let's say, music bands. But then, so back then you're like, how could I try to fake this magic around this band Metallica? How do I fake the logo? How do I create, like, I have the power. And this is kind of like, uh, it was a little bit like a revelation to me. By creating 5 signals that feel right, I have the power to make this band of 4 friends feel like a much better band than they are, and much bigger, right? So like, why could they not have a logo like the Metallica logo? Why do we have to take a photo that is boring? Let's take a photo that is a bit more weird, or like, let's increase the production value. And suddenly they're from the south of Spain. They're not great, but damn, that's a pretty cool fucking cover. And that, maybe they're looking bigger than they are. Isn't that the goal of design at the end of the day? Like, we just, you know, someone can make a living making, I don't know, SD cards, but like if you build the right universe around it, suddenly it's like, oh my god, I need one of this. Um, anyway, yeah. So Spain, uh, I if you're familiar with the geography in Spain, so I was born in the south in a city called Granada. Uh,
Mhm.
Half my family lives in that city, half lives in this other city called Malaga. So southern, as much south as you can get. Great weather. The city is like pretty close to the beach. It's a beach city. So amazing childhood. I can't complain. I love it there. Eventually, I this wasn't before any economic crisis. By the way, Europe and Spain, there has always been a crisis. There's always like a lot of like, jobless, and oh my god, the crisis. There's always, for my whole life, there's always something going on, um, in like society and economic context and all that. But anyway, it got to a point where, for no reason really, I decided to get better at like speaking a different language, and think of moving to the UK. Um, I finished college in Spain. I started a PhD. I started working on a small studio called Pixel in Life, which the people that hire me, one of them is a really good friend to this day, David Navarro. He works at Roblox.
Mm.
Um, so he and that studio is what, for the first time, put a little bit of global context in my mind. I learned about the FWA. I learned about all this DeviantArt and like all this like universe of really talented companies that were starting to be in. Um, so worked with them for almost 3 years, and eventually I just realized that I've been in the UK for 3 months before, but I realized that I wanted to try to live in the UK. I just felt like I'm young, there's nothing to lose. If I fail, I can always go back. I'm lucky I could go back with my family, even though they wouldn't enjoy it. Um, so I did. I moved to the UK. I had no job. I moved to this. Um, I rented a room in a family's house, and for a month I worked on my portfolio and paper vision, this thing, the move. It was great. And then I started looking for a job, and I don't know. I got a job, and then I changed jobs, and eventually the opportunity to come to the US um, came up. And even though I never really thought too much about it, but this is 2010. I moved to New York, and the rest is history. Yeah, sorry. What was the question again?
I think we got it. I think we talked about kind of just growing up in Spain, and kind of you kind of foresaw the future and kind of landing in America, and we can go through the rest of those opportunities, but you just had the inkling to get out of Spain and kind of progress your career in that fashion.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's funny how I just saw it. There was no, I remember telling my parents, and they were like, "Are you sure?" They were like, "Whoa, we never push you or ask you to do any of this." But I was like, "Yeah, it's gonna be great." I knew it was gonna be great. It's a weird thing. Yeah.
Creative optimism. I think it's a superpower in itself. And I think it sounds like you had it based on just going full circle back to your friend's band, understanding the power of design to leverage your creative execution in order to level them up, in order to seem like a higher class tier of band when they might have just been hanging out in Malaga or wherever they were playing shows at the time.
Right? I mean, what do you think? To me, there's, if we're lucky as designers, right? You start with clients that send you a logo and it's like a Word doc. And you're like, I ask you for the logo, and now you have this Word doc, and I'm like, oh my God. And you're like, I know what the job is. The job is to make you legit, to make you look and feel legit. And eventually you can download their logo because they're well-known companies, but the job is still that one. How do I use the power of design to give you 5-7 signals that make people feel like, oh, they're so friendly, or this seems like a great service?
That's definitely always the job. And I feel like at Rogue, we still get clients that are either startups or companies that just need to radically transform their image. So I'm always thinking about that. I often will just completely ignore a client's logo, or just subtly or not so subtly tell them no, this needs to change. You don't even need this logo. Just let us just transform your digital kind of brand, and then we can just backtrack to whatever that iconography or symbol is. But you just need to show up online and look professional and translate some series of emotions to your customers so they get it.
And I to your point, when it's a young company, I think we all have baggage, right? You have emotional baggage, you have relationship baggage, you have family or whatever. But brands have baggage too. And a young brand, listen, if you're working with Apple, please don't disregard the history of Nike. Of course, we're not gonna start from scratch here. But when it's a young brand, sometimes you have to be well, let's not get bogged down by this short baggage that you have, if that's stopping you from achieving more. Yeah.
Let's summarize your agency / career trajectory up until now. We had mentioned in your bio kind of going through Fantasy and Be Real and all of these different agencies. But what was that experience like going through those really big name digital agencies? And I think more importantly, what are the core lessons that you took away, and what did you learn from your experience there?
Fantasy Interactive has a great place in my heart. They took a chance on me, and that changed my life. Like there was no reason they couldn't find someone more talented or whatever, but like they saw potential and they went for it. And my life, I will be in a different place right now, not in a bad place, probably will be happy somewhere else, but
Mhm.
hopefully. But it definitely, if this life was like a one road, suddenly this branch got created, and like I met my wife in New York, like it just suddenly shaped what it is today. So I went in. I was and I am a fanboy. Like I love their work.
Mhm.
So I do remember, coming through the door and like seeing the photos, and they had this like really cool like old school frames, a little bit like the one you have behind you, but like much bigger. And they had some of the UI they made for Time Warner back then, or for like frame in this golden old school frame on top of this exposed brick. And I remember looking at it thinking, fuck yeah, like this is it. I finally came to the place where they care about those details so much that they put it in the wall. Like that, I felt like I'm home in a
Mm.
weird way. I felt like I care about it, and I never met anyone that care as much as I do. But now I am here. So great. I mean, I could cry right now. Like Anton, David Martin, like everybody that went through that journey with me, like I have nothing but, like just being really thankful to them. What did I learn? Man, I learned that, there's no magic sauce. Like
Well,
that's
I
what
was
I
going to
learned.
ask you what your secret sauce was so that I could be a better designer, but
No, like, well, I years before I was like copying their icons and being like, look at the detail, like I was like micro analyzing iconography, glowy parts of the buttons. And when I joined, I was like, oh shit, now it's on me. Like I've been a fan. Now it's up to me to like make sure this goes forward, and like that signature is still there, but also is my signature now. So I do remember feeling a little bit like, I guess I'm gonna, fake it a little bit until you make sense of like, I'm gonna continue doing what I'm doing. But the critique that I'm getting now, I'm like, I went from like a place where I was like really good to a place where everybody was really good, and now I had to level up. Uh,
Mhm.
so just humbleness and like that responsibility, and like honestly just doing my best, and sometimes also just tapping into your inner child, right? And that's what got you there. So tons of conversations with Anton were like, what is, like, you're looking at a project and already the layers of course that has to be there, of course that has to be there, but what is the one thing that is like unnecessary, but kind of like the signature.
Mm.
I found that at Finance Interactive at FI, I had to like find that thing, and I was like encouraged to find the thing. And when we found it together, it was like, you see all these designers gathering around like, whoa, that's so cool. you know and I'll tell you, just to bring this down, I'll tell you an example, really really stupid, like a simple arrow, right? So you think of an arrow like, oh, two diagonal sticks. Everybody just does that one arrow. At FI, we used to do this arrow that had like, I'm gonna draw in this case. So you had this. So you had the middle point slightly off to the right. So it made it feel like this is a completely unnecessary craft detail, that if you spend time doing this, that means if you put the amount of care in these small details, you could almost like, assume the rest of the experience is going to be fucking amazing.
Mm.
So sometimes it came down to stupid details like that, but sometimes it was like a nice interaction, or like, Anton, I remember, did this kind of like book interaction and animation and CSS for a Google project, and when that page flipped, we were all like, oh my god, look at the reflection, how did this is amazing, like it's just pure joy because you found the thing. um
Well, I mean, like, I think that's a really key thing. I mean, sweating the small stuff, making sure that the small details are as important as the big details just shows that you care. There's a craft involved, that the attention to detail and the love that's translated through that process. If you love the work that you're doing this much, that you put that time in, it's absolutely going to show to someone else on the other side of the screen, or the physical book, or whatever the product, digital product brand is. It's just going to resonate that much more.
Right. So probably that was the lesson there. I think, my journey at FI went from that New York moment to like working with a bunch of different talented people that I really admire, and finally, having like enough way to attract that talent, right? So like working with Brian Powell, like I love his work way before I met him, and being able to now be in the same location and like, just exchanging ideas or whatever, that's just like incredible. All right, so that was it. Then I did a couple of years a couple of years maybe at Be Real. Be Real is also the Swedish company. I worked with them briefly for a freelance project in New York, and then I joined them. And this is a time where, to me, I felt like the journey at FI like was kind of like getting to a loopy place, like a bit repetitive, and I felt like, I don't know. I work in Sweden for a couple of months and in New York. Like nothing wrong with the company on itself. It just felt like I reached a point where I somehow stopped learning in some ways.
Yeah.
So Be Real, in comparison, had a much more advertising approach to projects. So it wasn't so much about like the craft of the UI, even though individually they had that quality, of course. But it was more like the integration between interactive film and they had another branch that I'm forgetting on, content. So that felt pretty good. It felt a little bit like definitely faster pace, less kind of like iconic project, but at the same time learning more like how to work with a shooting, a production crew and a director, and going in location, and like even having to do UI for film. That all started at Be Real, and that kind of project we didn't have it at FI. So as much as individually, again, people would love to have had that project, companies didn't go to FI for those projects. So yeah, it was a slightly different beast, but I learned that you could apply all that care for the craft in suddenly a different context. And sometimes it's not so much about the button, it's more about like, what is the overarching concept of this video, of this like action, and then UI comes and complements it, but it's not the hero. So I think maturity wise, like I went through a journey where I care about that one thing a lot, and then I grew into other areas of the industry by going to Be Real. So that probably was the thing there. Great people. I had a lot of, it was kind of fun that I had there. It was a much bigger company. They had different offices. They always have like, you had this cast of directors. So like the flavor of each of them was different. Working with them was different. Going into a shoot with 100 people, and you're like, you're raising your hand. I'm sorry, we need to take that shot again because I didn't see that quite right. And everybody's like, okay, well, reset. Suddenly you're like, yeah, that's the job. I feel bad about this. But yeah, that was Be Real. Then I came back to FI, but I came back to FI to San Francisco. And my role there was kind of like more like heading the office in terms of design. I had a peer, Simone, and then he left shortly after. And to me, that was, if I learn about the craft, I learn about like the production value and like film and things that I didn't have access to before. When I came back to FI, like the whole industry has shifted a little bit towards product. And at that point, agencies were more like, we don't only do Chrome experiments. Now we do mobile apps and platforms and like portals or whatever. And I feel like FI was really well positioned, especially in San Francisco, to be that company. So suddenly the challenge was different. It wasn't like, I'm crafting this button for this website, it was, or and crafting this website like down to the detail, it was more like, all right, let's take a step back. Let's think more in the context of products and how can we help Adobe improve their, I don't know, their onboarding experience to Photoshop. Like that was not FI 3 years before. So yeah, did a few years there, and again met a bunch of talented people. I guess my learnings there was New York is really different from San Francisco in terms of the clientele that you get. So where New York is a bit more like 1, 2, 3 in my experience, like yeah, we're gonna do this and this is the thing. It's like East Coast kind of like attitude, straightforward. San Francisco came with the nuances of, we should look at this again, and you're like, yeah, but what do you mean by that? Like I had meetings when I first, I think it was Google or somebody, and the feedback they were giving me was like, I don't get it. I'm like, I understand the words, but I still don't know what you're asking me to do. Why is this so nuanced? Like coming from a context where it's like yes or no,
Yeah.
Do you find that yourself, like for your clients?
Our clients are kind of like all over the place. So New York clients are definitely more straightforward. I think the kind of tech clients that we have in California are either sort of like they're very like, we know what kind of things we need, like we need to hit these goals. So like they're either kind of like very straightforward and like goal driven, or they're more of like focused on the feeling. And we definitely are more leaning towards that. I know that there's tangible goals that we need to hit, but I really want to make people feel something and like have an experience and maybe slow down. So it tends to be that I like those people, but I like the New York people where they're just like, let's make this shit happen. Let's do it. And I want it to be dope. Like we get a lot of those type of people that let's be dope.
I have this, I'm not going to say the name, but I worked with this founder like years ago and a couple of years ago as well, again, where we have like a mutual respect kind of relationship, and it comes with like really little hand holding to a point where I'm the one finishing the project, because if it was up to the other party, the project will never finish.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, hey, I'm just, I thought it would be cool to try this out, and I'm working on this like onboarding thing, and oh yeah, that's cool, yeah, that's great. And I'm like, sure, so okay, so that, and then the next week I thought about this, and eventually I'm like, well, I guess I'll send you an invoice, and if there's something else, just let me know. But I always feel like I could just keep working on this thing forever. It's not telling me anything. So
those
funny.
are the weirdest experiences. I mean, they're good, but they're also like, are we done?
Yeah. Are you happy? Like, it isn't that funny too. Like, we want people to be happy. Like, are you satisfied? If you're satisfied, it's gonna make me happy. But eventually, you cannot overthink it too much, right? So you're like, I think you're happy. So let's just like you want to tap into your state of play instead of in the state of like anxiety and like results driven. But of course, if you're running your own show like you are, you probably need some deadlines. Right?
Yeah, having the tangible deadlines. Well, where I've come into this where like things will slowly start to creep, and then they'll slowly creep a little bit more, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's now like difficult to take new projects because of the fact that this is creeped out. So like actually like a business like effect in the pipeline as a result of not keeping on track of timelines. And even if you want like the best results, you have to kind of keep things moving. You have to keep momentum, and you have to be there to guide the client every step of the way. Like they're not getting you things on time affects you, which has a chain reaction to the designers and the development team, anyone involved. So like there's a very clear business value to being timely, but also you have to leave enough time for like the experimentation and the play and getting things right and getting things crafted. But I guess it's just like working within those parameters. So you're doing the best with what you have, in the time that you have, but also, I guess, like the resources available to you as well.
I think that might be one of those deterrents from agencies. I do feel like, having been part of one and many, and seeing the process like unfold, and the PMs come and look at the spreadsheet with all the times and all that, like there's an aggressiveness that, when I heard this about the SEAL team, like the SEAL, like Marines or whatnot, they always like train in really hard conditions, because when you are in a state of fear, you always resort back to your basic training.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like agencies, when all this time kind of like constraints come into play, you always default back to like, okay, what is the package? What do we know how to do? We're gonna give them this comms, and then that's it. And as if you're on the other side, it does feel like you're being served something that might not be too useful.
Mm.
If you only end up with a deck, and like all the research is there, and there's the vision, or there's like a half-baked design, or not implemented because you didn't engage with developers, you're like, what did I get from this relationship? And sometimes I feel like that plays against agencies in a weird way. Yeah.
It's a very interesting point, because I mean, I guess there would be, you've been on both the agency side and the in-house side. You've worked with many, many creatives over the course of your career.
Mhm.
And I mean, I guess that's the point in which I was trying to make, where like the stretching the timeline out can lead to negative impacts, but it's a service industry first, where we're serving the client. The needs of the client and their audience need to come first. So if extending the project out so that we either get the best work done, or to accommodate the client's needs or their schedule, or just being empathetic and not trying to churn something out and treating them as just a check, I think is very essential, because ultimately I became a designer, started a business to create the best work possible, and also personal fulfillment and joy. And I don't like having those tough conversations with clients, like, hey, you need to do this now, otherwise this will happen. It's like, at the end of the day, I can probably take a deep breath and nothing bad will happen, and it'll all be fine. And if it gives you a little bit more time, it'll be all right.
Let me flip this around. Like,
Yeah.
what do you think has changed this past year in terms of, your relationship with clients, with, this whole like shrinking of the industry and all that? And to give context to my question, I think in my experience and my conversations with other people in-house, I feel like you start questioning like the usefulness of like, what is the best way to engage with an agency, right? And what are you going to get from it? And if that's something you're going to do a lot, maybe it makes sense to like delete all the layers of bureaucracy in between and just hire the designer.
Oh, I like that. It's interesting. I'm going to dive in on your side too, but
Sure.
I want to answer your question. This was a very slow year for a lot of people, including Rogue. And full transparency, the agency made less money in 2023 than it did in 2022. And that's something that like, it feels bad when you set goals and you don't hit goals, but like overall, I think it's a beautiful learning experience. And there's certain conditions that you can control, and there's certain conditions that you can't control. It showed me that like diversification of income is very important. And I have to think about, I always tried to keep my burn rate really, really low, but you definitely need to keep your burn rate as low as possible. And there's really not a need for frivolity. And how do you think about opportunities in ways of collaboration opposed to just the financial dollar? So how can everyone get what they want, but you can negotiate or figure out pricing or add-ons that would get you to like where you need to be for a project, but it may include different things than just like money itself. It could be publicity or equity or any sort of deal structure.
Yeah.
So I think I learned a lot from that experience. I think the course of it being slow, what I found is that people were less driven to spend money. They were thinking about how they were using their money, same way I was thinking about using my money and what I was going to get from my dollar amount. And I think that we tend to work with companies that are very much focused on transformation. So what is that transformation actually? It's like, oh, we're a new company and we have no image. That's literally starting from the ground up. But we're working with companies that need to transform and hit a certain idea or brand or feeling or perception. We also do a lot of that. So they understand what they're getting. And I always try to treat it as a true partnership, and in the sense of like working directly as an extension of their team. And I think like what you had said, why not just hire the designer in-house or just like personally, and then they're literally on the team. I think that's a very valid way to go. And I feel like there is even like a way that you could position a company as like, we join your team for X amount of time. You're basically kind of like buying us outright for X amount of time. And that's almost like a business model that you could approach if you're, I guess, like clever enough or crafty enough, or your lawyer is good enough.
I've seen that to your point now. Like I've seen recently, or in the past half year, I would say, I've seen a lot of like repackaging of services. So even yesterday, I saw this company. I don't know much about them, but I know they were really big on Dribble years ago, at least. They call it Elegant Seagulls. And they put this website out, and they call it Get Sauce. And basically, it's like a one-pager where they describe, honestly, like a really basic project of envisioning, right? Like set up a North Star and like get some comms and explorations around it. But I scanned it quickly, but I was like, here's another example of repackaging the old, and you take the old North Star project, you repackage it, you call it the sauce, you give it a fixed price, you give it a structure, and that suddenly can make it more attractive to people. Like the whole like subscription agencies too, right? Like, what is a subscription agency? It's a freaking retainer. It existed for like 50 years. But can I take the psychological load of a retainer if I say, hey, pay $20K a month for unlimited revisions? And I think it does for a lot of people, right? Like I think it mentally for a lot of people are like, oh shit, I can just pay $5K a month and I get unlimited things. So I don't need to worry about the SOW, the blah blah, the round one or the round two. No, just $5K every week. And yeah, it's getting crafty, what you said. Like we're just getting fucking crafty, but like it's the same concepts.
Really took away that like you can structure your business model however the hell you want. You can design it, you can get clever and crafty around it. And I don't know if I got too crafty because I'm still just pricing work specifically for the client's job, but I may just kind of like think about the structure or like the pieces differently to accommodate their specific needs. And I mean, like there's so many agencies doing the retainer, but like a subscription model, and maybe subscription is the future, but there is something nice about like, I'm paying this much for it and I know it's exactly that price, and you're going to do this for me and we're going to work together and it's going to be great. There's something about that too that I think appeals to like a certain group of people, because you never know how long something's going to take.
Right. Like, that's a really good point. Like by going into the subscription thing, I'm not going to slip yet 1 month into this. And maybe that's not what I was hoping for. I mean, there's a lot of like debate around that. Like if you abuse it, it becomes a scam because it's not scalable. And I think a few people apparently have done it. I never used those services, but yeah, it's just different ways to repackage the thing. But I think they all answer to where we are right now in the industry, and that is, as you said, like people are spending less. So we're just, designers are getting a bunch of like design courses out. Everybody's a teacher. Agencies are going into crazy ways to market themselves. It's a crazy time.
It is a crazy time, and I'm curious your thoughts on that. And maybe we have to go back a little bit to, your answer of, if you're seeing from the perspective as head of design at Opal Cameras and you need to hire, are you specifically reaching out to designers? Do you work with agencies, or do you like the freelancer kind of like young guns, or maybe it doesn't need to be young, but just like the hotshot freelancers and you just need extra hands on deck to accomplish something? What has been your approach, and how do you think about hiring people? Because I'm sure there's a lot of freelancers out there that kind of want to know the perspective of hiring managers or heads of design and things that they can take away.
So I think as a caveat, I would say, you can be, I think head of design is a title that has become like a bit of a catch-all. So if you are head of design at, I don't know, Herman Miller, or, or like established company for the last 100 years, and that's the title, maybe your org is like 300 people, I don't know. You could be head of design at a startup, or you could be head of design of a specific department in a bigger company. So it's really confusing. So maybe I'll forget about the title for a second and just talk about Opal. Opal is a startup, and we are really small. We're like, I'm not too sure the number is like 15 to 20 people. 15 to 20 people working on hardware is extremely rare. Like that's the number of people you have on, like this. We're talking about Amy, the calendar app. Like I think there are about that amount of people, and it's just software. So hardware, you have like electrical engineers, you have supply chain specialists, you have industrial design, and then add to that you have support, you have content and like social kind of like managing. Then you have design, and then you have overhead. Like you have like the founders kind of doing everything. So we are really the smallest articulation of hardware that you could have in the industry. So that really, this is a bit of a long walk to say that the way I look for people and I hire for people is not so much right now about, it's a mix of building a team, but also responding to needs. So last year we hired Hugo Alberg. He's a Swedish photographer, designer, 3D designer. And his background is same as mine and as yours, probably, like doing websites. He graduated to product design, and eventually he graduated to photography and 3D, and realized that he didn't enjoy all the taxing aspects of design so much. And when it comes to photography, he truly loves it. So when I was looking for someone, I was talking to people that are really talented product designers. They're really talented icon designers. And in my head, I'm like, well, I've done product, I've done marketing. I don't have enough product work to just hire someone that can do this one thing. I don't have enough marketing work to just hire somebody that is just going to do that. So I was intentionally looking for a hybrid, and Hugo with 3D and photography, that is a lot of the work that we do. And that extends to 3D in product, 3D in marketing, and photography, product marketing, and content. So I was really looking for like the unicorn that will complement me, right? Like I do a little bit of 3D, but I just don't have the time on my day-to-day to like, put him on enough hours to like be great at it. And he does. So we made the time for him to do that. So, and then photography, the same thing. Like I could take semi-decent photos, but I just don't have the time to take photos and on top design this thing or that thing, right?
For sure.
So full-time has been about complementing my own skills and like supporting other branches. And when it comes to freelance, it really is an answer to needs. So I work with Aristide, freelance developer, on the first website. Now we work with Luciano Ingamana on this second website. So I'm just, working with people that will complement kind of like what we do in-house. We work with Holographic. This is like a year ago. Design studio in Croatia. We work in motion pieces for the app. And some of the identity. That was fantastic. We work with ID-C, which is a Swedish collective. I'll send you the link later if you want.
Yeah.
But Nicholas, he worked on the brand originally, so the brand is something he did way before I came to Opal, and he's amazing. So every time we need any kind of a extension of the brand, it's like an easy person to go and say, well, this is your child. How will your child come to life in this other context? Um, so yeah, we work with a bunch of people, but it truly is really surgical. It's like we
Mhm.
have this need. This is what I go for. Like abilities that I have. Like I might not be the best web designer in the world, but I can pull a few punches. So like I don't necessarily. Maybe I look for someone to complement me, like motion. Hey, help me envision this thing. But we're not at a size where I can totally write myself off a project and be like, just you do it. Show me next week. Um, not yet, not yet. Yeah.
Well, I think the interesting thing inside of there is, so like you're working with all these teams, you have these specific needs, and looking through the Opal lens is kind of like working on your product and marketing needs specifically. You've accomplished many different projects with many different folks, very targeted and strategic. You've worked in agencies and in-house. How have you kind of refined your toolkit and your kind of personal ideology and thinking to be able to tackle any and all creative challenges that kind of come into your universe?
Hmm. Well, before, sorry, I have to say, another person we work with, I don't want him to get mad at me, is crying. Um, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he's actually a really good designer. He worked at Framer, and he helped us with the very first like initial concepts and for the Composer app. Sorry, crying. You're great. Okay, so back to your question, how do I like I guess frame a project depending on the nature of the project? Um, I think it really comes down a little bit to like just understanding, right? Like there's some projects where you can like fire up like Figma or Photoshop or whatever and like have a great comp and be like something like this. And you go to a presentation and we're like, yeah, that would be great. So I'll give you an example. When Opal already had a website when I came in, so I redesigned it to be more like a an umbrella of websites, where before it was just a one pager, and we redid the C1 page. Uh, I didn't have to work on the content of the C1 page because it was already like established,
Mm.
and it had been refined by the founders for like countless sessions, right? So it was almost like the script was given to me, and I was like, fuck it, let's do something cool about it. What if the camera comes on the bottom and like goes on top of the copy, and then it goes here, and then you can move the light? So it was really easy. Like it was truly just like I'm gonna come up with 2-3 concepts per section that for the site that you know have this like bangers moments. Like
Mm-hmm.
no, I don't know if who said this, like JC or whatever. Like no album can be full of bangers. You don't you cannot make an album full of bangers. It needs to be a journey. So give me a moment, then take me through a hill and prep me up for the next moment. Anyway, all to say that was a really easy project because I didn't have to, you know, worry about messaging or branding. It was all established. When we work on the latest website, um, I couldn't start in the same place. I couldn't start with this cool render and it just moves here. And what do you guys think? It was more like, what do we stand for? What is the placement for this product? How do we talk about it? Is it fashion? Is it utility? How are we differentiating from Insta360, Logitech? Anyway, all to say, like, if the journey started in a different place. When it came to the app, things that we're working right now, it's not always about is the comp looking good. No, it's more like, okay, well, this is the let's say the concept for this app. This is what we believe in. This is the core. Now, this is maybe an idealistic state of the app, and this is some basic like t-shirt sizing of how do we get there in a way that is, we're not like stepping on our own foot. So I guess the journey of design doesn't always start with design, right? Um, So in my experience, it just, it comes down to that. Like, we're planning a photo shoot now. Where do I start? Like, am I or Hugo, are we starting with like, let's look at locations, or are we thinking, well, what are we trying to do? Are we, I don't know, are we like, Bauhaus, like video from the 60s, slightly weird, utilitarian, like the workers, the blue collar workers of art? Or are we dystopian, ex machina, futuristic? Like, you try to find your place and then you go from there, right? I mean, all this. So yeah, it's just having your mind like this 6 or 7 different projects, and you're like, this smells like this one. So let's just start with that foundation and see where it goes, right?
The piggybacking off of that, I think, is like, it sounds like when you came into Opal, you had an opportunity to kind of reshape some of the vision of the company. So starting with that landing page for the C1, which I have to shout out is what I think we're both filming on right now. Thank you so much for the camera. I really appreciate it. Besides the product plug.
So I'll show you my favorite feature. It's called the loop, and I could just do that for like hours. So, or you could try to I'm just messing with the app right now live. So like, if I press this loop and I'm working on this big company, we have this all hands, 1,200 people are connected to the all hand. It's a 9 a.m. New York, so it's extremely early in the West Coast. I'm half asleep. I could just set my thinking face, and that's me for the next hour. Maybe I wouldn't move that much, but you get the point.
Oh yeah, super diligent thinker, really into the conversation. But I guess there was a question in there before I got distracted.
Sorry.
Is the redefining and creating the vision of Opal, because you had said like, it's not Logitech, it's not these other brands. What is the way that you're thinking about positioning Opal, and why is it that it is so much, I'm just going to say, quote unquote, cooler than all of those other brands? Because I feel like there's a true brand at Opal, and that's specifically created and cultivated. So how have you been able to refine and hone that positioning and vision?
So, I would say it sounds great that that's how you feel and that's the perception. When you are inside it, like, it's sometimes hard to see the forest, I guess. Everything that Opal is because the two founders, they have a solid vision. So Stefan, Brash, they started this company from nothing, right? They identify a need, and the need was like, we're in the middle of the pandemic, everybody's using their webcam, and the webcams are really underserved. They have been really underserved as a market until this point, right? So they saw the opportunity, and when looking at the Logitechs and the other incumbents at that point specifically, things have changed now. But yeah, you could spend a lot of money on a webcam, and it wasn't great. The tech in the webcam, it was truly underserved because there was no demand for it. So I think what Opal did really well is like, it understood that moment in culture and like society, and like it came up with almost a need that we didn't know we have. And it's like, wait, I'm not a streamer. I'm not going to buy $1,000 Fuji camera and like set it up and all that. I'm not at that point. I do appreciate the quality. So what if I could get closer at a fraction of the price? And that's I think what's ownable to Opal. Like, it's high quality than any other of these big companies that you mentioned. Sometimes a little bit more pricey. So you could buy a Logitech Brio for like $140, or there's a lower model for like $60, I think. But it's not the same type of quality. Like the camera doesn't work as well. So okay, I'm going back to your question. So I guess that's the foundation. How is it different? To me, I hope that anyone considering Opal can see that this company is focused on this product, and you're getting basically like nowadays tech and the software support that is needed for that to work great, that you don't get in these big orgs. Like on the flip side, you could connect a Logitech Brio to any computer. You could connect it to a Rock, and it will work. Where the C1 works better with Mac, because that's the app that we have. The new camera works on both Mac and PC. But again, if you were to use it with the app, you get certain things that you don't get on a PC. But it's all that. It's like, how do we basically pump on the quality without breaking the bank? Now the world has changed. So like since then, we're like 2 years or 3 years after the pandemic. Logitech has maybe caught up. All the brands have caught up, Elgato and all these guys. So now it's a different reality. And I cannot say more because I will get into what the future of the company might be, right? But yeah, like I think it was just that moment in history. And the brand, the way they briefed Nicholas on the brand was like, we want a brand that could exist in the 70s. We want one of these like timeless, German elevator kind of brand that is always there and was always there. And Nicholas, his work in general, but like with Opal, like he nailed it. Like it's a brand that could coexist with other timeless brands and feel right. Like it doesn't feel like 90s or 2000s. It just feels right.
How do we focus on, and this is applying to all designers, not even just like the work at Opal, how do we focus on being timeless and or capturing this essence of longevity within a brand and the work that we do to make it feel like something, let's say, well, I guess like what you had just said, something like that could exist any point in time and still be interesting and dynamic and versatile. So what is the kind of conditions of creativity that we have to think about to create that kind of work that has legs that last for a long period of time?
Yeah, well, it really depends if that's what you're trying to achieve. I don't think it's the goal of branding to always be like timeless,
Yeah.
Like sometimes it's just to be current, and sometimes it's to be retro, and sometimes it's to be something else. Like I don't think every company should aim for like could be placed in between Apple and IBM and still be like, yeah, like I don't know. It's not always the goal, in my opinion. What I always envision with Opal is like, can we have this like strict, dry brand, but then build experiences on top of it that are more like in tune with where we are culturally. So like, let's keep the logo tight, of course. But if I'm gonna make a website, it's not gonna look like a poster, from Massimo Vignale. It's gonna be like, kick-ass. It's gonna have some 3D moments, like WebGL, whatever. Like you're building on top of it, so it doesn't always, it's not stale as a brand. It's just solid. It's a solid foundation to build things on top. Now, to answer your question, like how do we get to that point? I mean, that's kind of like the $1 million question, right? I don't know. I mean, like what is this? Sol Bass, I think. No, who's this famous designer who did the NSNBC logo and the Next logo?
Oh gosh, I should know.
Paul Rand. Jesus Christ.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Like Paul Rand, I think I saw this interview. They were asking him like, "How do you make this timeless?" And he's like, "I don't know. I just do things that I like." And they're like, "How did you know this was the right thing?" It's like, I don't. He said something I love. It's like, there's no right or wrong. Like if you get used to see it, then it becomes right. Like, of course it's right because you're used to see it,
Okay.
Yeah, I know it's tricky. And
Yeah.
arguably a lot of his logos look similar, but it doesn't matter. That's why you went for him, I guess, right? Like he has a certain style. Like there's no, you cannot scratch this mountain to find some sort of like foundational stone that says you did it right. There's no right or wrong. You do something, and if you're lucky enough, people say it enough and be like, it's perfect. Yeah.
There really is no secret sauce. You said it earlier, and I guess it's true.
Isn't that weird? Like, I think we all, as anybody learning anything, right? We all looking for like the absolute truth. And I think it's weird in your life when you get to like, oh, there's no absolute truth. We're just making things.
We're just making things. I think the thing that I really resonated with in what you had just said was, maybe you were putting words in Paul Rand's mouth, but he was making something that was cool or personal to him, or is making work that resonated with him.
Exactly.
And I think that is the essential thing that we have to do first. We have to make things that, if we're super excited about, it should probably translate with receptivity in the world, because as creative people, we have an eye for certain things.
Right.
If we can also tap into culture that's like very much piggybacking on our work and pushing it forward. But then I think the other thing is, like, I guess we don't know until it's out in the world, because we may have to adapt, we may have to change and pivot. And it really is, I guess, the other part of the job is like putting it out and seeing what happens. And that's the thing that I always, even though I do this, day in, day out, it's like, that's the part that I kind of forget. I'm like so focused on the craft. It's like, let's see what happens when we put it out into the world and get that feedback loop and see if we need to do anything else.
Isn't it frustrating when you put something out? Let's say, I know you're talking about releasing, let's say, a project or a brand, but like just with social media, where you put something that you're like, I'm so proud of this. I worked on it. I think it's fantastic. You put it out and it gets almost no feedback or not the response that you were expecting. And then other day you're like, I just had this freaking video from like 3 years ago. I just post, who cares? I don't think I posted it before. Oh, sure, just put it there. And oh my God, that's amazing. You're like, what the hell, man? My compass is totally,
I think it may be the most maddening thing in the world when you're like so proud of something and then no one gives a shit. At least that's what it feels like. But there's so many factors, I guess. It's like time of day, what was happening in the world. Did something blow up and that was way more attention grabbing than, I don't know, your design that you thought was cool and put out into the world. But there really is no rhyme or reason. We can only accommodate the factors that are in our control and then release it. And what I found is just like, you can just post the same damn thing like 3 months later. People will forget. Their attention span is like this small.
That's interesting. I try not to repost, but you're right. Like a lot of it is like, again, well, we're getting into another point of like social reward and like, why do we do this and blah, blah, blah. But like, oh yeah, it sucks. And then it's like, you put something out and it suddenly blows up a little bit and you're like, wow, unbelievable. Yeah. When I have those moments, I always go, maybe this is my thing. Maybe glass reflection on this thing rotating, maybe that's my thing. But then you're like, no, and try something else and it doesn't work.
I really liked what you had said about the Opal brand. It has a very solid foundation. And I believe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounded like you were just looking at culture and how to adapt culture for your specific goals and needs with the creative work. And I think that could apply to anything and maybe a good takeaway or lesson for people designing currently. How does one tap into culture at large and kind of adapt to that culture, but also not get caught up in, let's say, a specific trend? I guess we could be trendy for the sake of kind of having a hot and fast launch or kind of piggybacking off of one moment in time. But how do you think about capturing culture in a nutshell and then adapting as it kind of changes?
I think we'll have to like, maybe define culture a bit more. Like when we say we're capturing culture, it's like we're like capturing the zeitgeist, like we're somehow like it feels like the next right thing. You know how sometimes if you overthink it, or you kind of like get too much into your own like spiral, you put something out and suddenly people are like, wait, what? This doesn't have any relation to anything. And sometimes the work just feels like the natural next step, and it's the right time and the right moment. I don't really know. I don't really have an answer. I think there's a lot of, I digest culture in many ways. The honest truth is like I'm not partying in Brick Lane in London. You're not gonna find me in like I'm not gonna be like clubbing in LA, or like I'm not I'm not experiencing culture as I had in the past. Now my culture is digested, is somehow processed by my own experience and the window of internet, I guess.
Mhm.
But you still you still have these conversations, you still have access to people, and you get like perils, right? Like um, things, you get like movements. So
Mhm.
I'll tell you one thing that is, for the past couple of years that is been happening is this notion of the unbundling of devices, right? So like I think culturally we all have grown used to this and like almost tired of it. Like our relationship with our phones have become, it's not so much about love anymore, it's dependency, and we know that the things that are not great about it. So like culturally I think we all have an incline right now to consider um, one purpose devices.
Mhm.
So an MP3 player that has better quality, the Rabbit tiny speaker that you have like access to whatever ChatGPT or whatever. I think that is something that is happening culturally. That is just one of many things, right? Um, so for us, I would say like two things. If we are working on a product, is one thing, and if we're working on the promotion of a product, is another thing. If
Mm.
we're working on the promotion of a product like branding or whatnot, maybe it's about acknowledging this reality and like, you know, what does that mean for like people and the ability of people to like understand a new brand. Are we is our narrative like counter to what's happening right now in the world? So are we like, hey, you live in a sea of sameness, here's a new thing? Or, oh, you're tired of like, like classic password thing, like it's a bit of a um, irony. You're like, oh, tired of like having 1,000 passwords everywhere, use our service to hold all your passwords, but you need one more password. So like what's as a brand, like how how could you make a difference? And I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't know many brands right now that are making any difference
Mm.
to me. I think there are a lot of like, well, that's not fair to say. This is all based on my filter of reality. um the honest truth is like there are many brands that are like, under the radar
Mm.
and for a 40-year-old man. But maybe if I'm a college student, maybe I'm using them all the time. They're just living in that space, right?
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I mean, I can identify like macro trends, I see them in my experience. And when it comes to like um, to the existence of a product, when it comes to like promoting a product, it's a whole different thing. I think there's a lot of like, I think there's a lot of formulas that work these days. So I'll give you an example. A few years ago, we pitched Levi's.com, and we lost the pitch, and Instrument did it and did a fantastic job on the website. Our pitch for on Levi's was way too advanced for the time. That's the honest truth. Like I was excited, but they couldn't see it. It wasn't like it wasn't. It was 5 steps ahead of them instead of 1 step. So our proposal for Levi's was your site. You don't control the narrative of your brand. You don't control the content of your site. This is somehow going to be pure socially like curated. So it's
Mm.
gonna be everything that's happening, harvesting in social networks about Levi's is going to live here. And we're going to use and leverage as much of that as possible, because you're not the owner of your brand anymore. For the past 50 years, maybe you were at the beginning. Now, the only thing you can do is like steer the ship and, show with the best light, which, you can do.
Yeah.
And then it was that combined with a lot of like AR and like being able to test your thing and customize jacket and make it right away. And we had the secondhand market as well, because that's a big thing on like denim lovers. Anyway, Instrument did it. I don't know their pitch, but I know the first version of the website they put out, it was just a better formatted Levi's.com. It looked beautiful, great storytelling, it felt like a Medium article. And I felt, God damn it. Like it wasn't, we could have done this, but it wasn't just how I thought at the pitch should go. I thought we should inspire them, right? Anyway, all to say, like 3 years, 5 years later, you can see some of that social content creeping in now. So they have like this thing that is always like playing videos of reviews or whatnot. So like it's happening. It was just not the right time. So in terms of culture, as in promoting a brand, I think our head was in the right place, but culturally we maybe were way too ahead of our time, I guess, for them to even acknowledge this was right for their brand.
Yeah.
So it's hard. Like sometimes when I go on a pitch, like thinking I'm offering you something that could have been done 5 years ago, but maybe I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's a good point. That makes me think of like James Cameron in Avatar, where he had the script for years and waited on the advancement of the technology to be able to capture the vision of what he had for the film. And like, yes, he could have made it when he finished the script and he had, the backing of the studios, but if it came out that time, I think it would have been like early 2000s.
Yeah.
Then it wouldn't have had the same impact. And I'll candidly say that's not a film that I love, but the fact the technology was so cutting edge and advanced for that time period, and now it's a technology that's used in many other films and even video games. I think that's the kind of interesting part of it, is that holding on to an idea until it fits into the cultural zeitgeist or what's capable at the time is an interesting thing to think about.
To piggyback on this, like I heard recently one specific note and then another note from the past that it really resonated with me, because there are certain things we take as a given. Like, of course, this happened, but they were really revolutionary at the time. So one being Star Wars, right? So like Star Wars, if you look at the context of the movies being done at the time, it truly took a leap. What do you call it? Like a massive leap ahead in terms of the representation of space and adventure. Like back then, like if you see some of the behind the scenes, like the music, like Flash Gordon and all the shows used to have was like funky. So they would go running and the music and they were like, no, we're gonna go classical music. And it was, even though it's obvious now, it wasn't done at the time. Another example on this one is the Beatles, right? So like the Beatles and bands around that time that introduced like electric guitars for the first time. Like that wasn't, if we were having this conversation before the Beatles, like it took a leap of faith to like, oh, what if we bring this sound? So if we bring this example now, what is the one thing that hasn't happened that the moment it happened is going to be obvious?
Yeah, you're putting something into the world that becomes part of culture, and I guess like the world catches up to you. And that's an interesting thing, because you never know until it happens that you're doing something. And maybe it ties back to the fact that like if you do something from your unique perspective that just feels so natural to you, maybe other people are thinking it without knowing it.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Like I think Rick Rubin is like, creativity is in the air, right? Like we just capturing ideas from it. Like sometimes it is in the air. It's true. And by the way, like this could be big examples like Star Wars, or it could be like, just the idea of parallaxing on a website, right? When that happened 10 years ago, it was obvious, but it hadn't happened before. So it became like, of course, that's a thing. Or like the layer background, right, on that sketch brought up that, before it took a lot of work in Photoshop to even do it, it became like a staple when it comes to like, UI design and whatnot. Yeah. It's tough. I don't know. I don't think there's a formula. I think the people that get to that point, like they just naturally have their journey, and somehow you could look back at the journey and understand it made sense for them to get there. But like, I don't think they even know it. Yeah. So sometimes you have to stop rationalizing things, I guess, and just do whatever you think is cool. Right?
I love it. I think that's true. Do whatever you think is cool.
Tell me more.
I'm trying to think like where we could go in the conversation.
Yeah.
I think this ties into everything that we have talked about, but this is a quote from Milton Glaser. Creativity is a journey. The ideas are the reward. And sometimes that's something that I struggle with because I want, I want to feel satisfied within my work, but I also want the satisfaction of knowing that I did a really good job on the project. And it comes down to, if this is our career and our job, and I want to have this career for longevity and not just kind of flame out in like a 5-year, I guess, like flash of glory, I have to think about the process and think about the ideas as kind of the carrot in generating these ideas in this a bulk of work, even if a lot of it doesn't end up, well, a lot of it will end up on the cutting room floor and a lot of it won't end up in the world. So it's just like being happy and comfortable with the ideas in that process. Does that resonate with you, that quote?
Yeah, somebody, this managing director I work with, a huge, call it the shelfies, no, the shelfies, like all the ideas that stay in the shelf, they never made it. We sometimes we'll celebrate it. What are the shelfies this month? Well, we thought this it would be cool, but the client don't like it. It's okay for the shelfies. Yeah, to me, like, there's a lot of, it's easy to just like keep churning work, and like I think there's enough inspiration, sometimes almost too much, that will allow you to like just keep churning work that is decent, that clients are going to be happy with, etc., etc. But there's always something special when you're like really proud of the core idea, and you can like buck it up, and regardless if it happens or not, I think those are the projects that years later you look back and you're like, this looks, you could say, I do things like this, like, this looks old now, I get it, but the idea, like, I still think that is a really good idea. Like, maybe it goes beyond execution. It's more like, I think the execution inevitably it responds to a moment in time.
Yeah.
But the idea is what hopefully should transcend time, right?
I think more and more people need to focus on the concept and the idea and translating that idea into something that's unique. I think there's a lot of designers that are just focusing on the aesthetic and focusing on maybe like what is cool right now, and like the trendiness of certain design styles and tactics, and a lot of that's showing up with kind of like Web3 aesthetic, if you will. And like that's fine for like if like you're super into that right now and that's what you want to do. But ultimately, if you're designing something for the intention of a client and they need to stand out, they have tangible goals, often it's like a magical idea that will stand out more than just the aesthetic. And it's like when you have the harmonious balance of all of the pieces is really when something kind of shines and cuts through the noise.
Right. Isn't that, I think there's some parallel path to the evolution of a designer and the evolution that you're talking about, because as a designer, you need to master the craft, and maybe mastering the craft first comes through the trends and the Web3 aesthetic right now, but what used to be 2 years ago something else. And like the moment you get to that point, let's say you join an agency, you work with a creative director. The creative director is the person that is like, this is cool, your execution is cool, but let's take a beat and think about the idea, right? So eventually that designer, they will get to the point where they're like, okay, I think I'm design is, I think I understand the principles of it. I could always get better, of course, but now I want to think more of the idea. Therefore, you elevate yourself mentally to a different role. So it's almost like, as an individual, you need to go through that journey and eventually appreciate everything and have a good balance. But if you don't, hopefully you're working with people that counterbalance you.
Yeah.
To get the best of you as a either craft person or idea person, right? Yeah. Tell me a bit on, like, in your studio, like how many people are you guys, and like Do you the teams on a project, maybe like how big or small are the teams?
Flexes for the individual client. So the core makeup is just a couple of people, myself and our developer. And then we kind of expand when there's necessary needs. So that would bring in a lot of brand and freelancers that just we continuously work with on and off. But also like 3D capabilities that we bring on designers for that. And so the team is always changing and expanding, and I think that's a good thing. But when thinking of ideas and that's kind of the craft, sometimes I flex between the two because I get very caught up in like the specific nuances of the details, and sometimes I forget about like the core idea, and I'm just so focused on like the making of the damn thing. And then it's just like, oh, okay, so that idea phase that really needs to come first, and that's what we try to do in our processes. When we're doing strategy, we're also focusing on what is the carrot, what is the unique perspective, what is the idea that we can build this all around. And it can be as simple or as expansive as the project needs. So like it could be as simple as we want this to make this feel like music, so it feels dusty like an old record. Or it could be like we're patching something up and we need to think of a visual metaphor for kind of closing gaps and fixing things. How do we patch? Like, how do we create like a list of ideas for that one thing? And we'll build the copy or the site around like that visual metaphor or idea. So I feel like once we get that down on paper, then it's just like execution. So maybe it's like designing the process so you don't miss a core step, but sometimes you got to flip flop or go back and forth in order to make it like a seamless, beautiful project at the end.
Yeah, I think people, what I've experienced in my life is like people gravitate to metaphors always and stories. Design is cool, but mostly it's for designers. So like when I am presenting, when I'm presenting a set of concepts, I always have a bit of the origin story, and it comes a bit too much through as a ad man kind of like technique, but I do enjoy it, and I think it gives it like context. And sometimes by explaining the core, then you show the execution, and if the execution is not quite right, if the core is right, you can riff on the core with the client or your stakeholder and like get to a better place. But if you just go with like, yeah, cool design, this one is blue, this one is gray, and this one is kind of like noir, like it just doesn't, you're just having the wrong conversation.
I think so. Yeah,
it's tough. What are your plans for 2024? Your goals as a studio?
Goals as a studio, I think is, well, we touched about like finances. I think just get back fully on track, get a lot of savings in the bank. But obviously that comes with having a steady, consistent flow of clients. So again, trying to diversify income. And this we'll touch on what we talked about earlier, where everyone's a teacher now, but I'll finish the question first.
Oh, no.
So focusing on that, but also focusing on community and also kind of general brand building. So showing up more in the community. I'm not trying to be like a thought leader or anything of that nature. Literally, I started this podcast to share information, to open up conversations that I was happening normally and share those with others so that they could get value. So I want to kind of know everyone because I love having these conversations and I just want to learn and continue to grow naturally. And hopefully people can grow by a result of listening to this. So that's another byproduct. But we also have a steady stream of releases that will be coming out that we're really excited about. And I think that that'll generate some momentum, which I think is difficult when you're in an agency model and there's gaps in the business and you just don't know when things are releasing and then there's slowdowns. And so the steady stream of getting things out can be a little bit tricky. So you have to get clever about, are you creating work? Are you doing like pet projects? How are you showing up online? Because it is very easy to fall from someone's attention. And I think like using social media to stay on top of mind is really crucial now. And it's just being clever and doing it in a unique way that's very authentic, opposed to just like, I guess, like making things for the sake of making things, maybe having a care and a love and a passion behind it, an idea maybe behind it.
Yeah, it's that's a good point. Like I've been writing for the past maybe like 2 months a list of like studios to watch, and it's a massive list already. Like there's a there's a lot of them. I think that the aftermath of COVID and like the return to office and all this, like there are a lot of, I've never seen in my life so many like, and this is not your case, but so many like 2-3 people like studios that they did great work together in an agency, and now they're doing their own thing. And some of them take the path of the collective, as in like we're just an umbrella for individuals. Some of them are like, no, we're a box, and you hire us, and then we do this. But there are a lot of them, and yeah, how do they stay top of mind? Like it's not always with projects. You never know when a project's gonna go out. Depends on your involvement in the project. But I just learned today a project that I worked on for Riot Games just got killed as part of the new reorg. So like 3 years later, that thing is dead now. If I was depending on that for my PR, like, that would be a disaster. Yeah, it's tough, but definitely a lot of noise. And to your point of like everybody is a teacher, yeah, is that something you guys are thinking about?
Well, so I made a course with awards, and that is out. And
is it awards or Domestika?
It's on awards. Awards reached out, I think this was 2 years ago, and I made that. It's called The Secret Sauce, which maybe if I was maybe if it was today, I wouldn't call it that. Maybe I would call it that. It's all about the creative journey and the ideas of the rewards, and being a creative is hard, and you just have to feel it out, man. But I think you learn and you grow. And the whole point of that course was kind of like fundamental ideas that don't change in branding, and kind of focusing on strategy and like the idea creation and art direction, how they all kind of tie together. I think people should focus more on building authentic communities and trying to do their best to help others without being quote unquote salesy. I don't think you need to ask for money all the time in the aspect of trying to get something from people. I think you can share and be authentic, and hopefully people will love that so much that they would want to compensate you in the end. But that could be a long, nurturing process. And I think a lot of people aren't in things for the long game. And I imagine that this podcast will be a very slow grind. And I'm okay with that, because I'm doing it for the sake of the conversations. And I think more people should have a mindset of that kind of longevity, opposed to like the quick, rich, because I think that is just a made up thing. I think you got to put the grind in.
Yeah, and you're doing the work. Like I do admire, as I said at the beginning, like if anything, you're getting to know a lot of like perspectives and a lot of people that, different walks of life, but somehow a similar destination. So yeah, it's I'm sure it's gonna pay off in one way or another.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious where you think designers should place their energies, or I guess what should designers think about for their career over 2024 and maybe even the future? What are some essential skills, some methods, some techniques, some approaches, some ideas that I guess designers, creatives need to think about in order to kind of adapt to the radical change of technology and I guess just tools and things that are on the market?
Yeah, I think that, for the past, like, I'm going to say 5-6 years, every time I answer this question, I always say, learn 3D. Like, learn 3D, stop being so precious about your your Figma or your Sketch or whatever, just step into all the territories. I feel since then there are a bunch of designers right now that are like more full stack, I guess. um, the world has changed though in the past year. I think if you were starting the journey right now, I will still do the taxing things of learning the fundamentals. And that doesn't mean going to a design school for 5 years. There are many ways to do it. um, but I think there's still like truths to what we do there, like that don't change. Composition, typography, all those things, they're just there. um, I would definitely say still 3D. I think 3D is a little bit like this money pit for companies where they invest on VR, and for a hot second we're like, oh my god, VR, it's gonna be great, and then you try, you're like, oh, I'm so hot, I don't want to do it. I think it's having an Apple moment, and oh my god, if Apple cannot do it, nobody can. So with Vision Pro and all this, I'm hoping, the next few years, like it's gonna become more and more mainstream to think in terms of 3D for interfaces and natural interfaces, as opposed to an app or something that lives on a screen. So that's a big thing. And then probably the last bit is like all this like AI and generative design. I think I said this when I sent you that blurb. Like I find, I mean, part of it is inevitable. So I think we should embrace it, just like we embrace everything else. Like we should know the tools and we should be part of the journey and use them to our disposal. Like, it's a great way to brainstorm ideas for a photo shoot, for example. But I also think, like, so I guess my advice to somebody starting today would be like, be aware and like use them, but it wouldn't be at the expense of, again, the fundamentals of like the craft or the understanding of user experience and all that. I think it's just yet another new tool.
Yeah.
It makes me really sad overall. Like it's a tool that makes me really sad, because I'm looking at the poster you have in the background. Like I look at it and I'm like, what a beautiful illustration, and like the depth of it, and like just the really small number of colors. Like it's just gorgeous. If you told me that was done with Midjourney, I'll probably like, okay,
That's exactly what my reaction would be too. This is from 59 Parks. A shout out to that organization.
Nice. Yeah, it's like, oh, like the wave. It's gorgeous, just gorgeous. But I think what's gorgeous is imagine the handicraft, of putting that together. And when you take that out, like, it's just sad.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, like, sorry, short answer. Being aware of all the tools, of course, keep your fundamentals solid, and like, get ready for hopefully spatial and natural, interfaces. I don't know if that's gonna crash yet again. It hasn't taken off, but at the same time, it has in some ways, right? Like I think maybe the Vision Pro reality is too far to even be a thing, but probably the Ray-Ban glasses in a couple of years will have some sort of minimal, interface, something really small. Like I think it's gonna start creeping in. That's my, and design is not always designing an interface. Sometimes it's selling an idea. So I think that's now. So yeah, be more aware of that.
I think that is true with the creative mindset. Creativity applies to everything and anything, really. You can be creative in business. You can be creative as a painter. You can be creative as a parent, even. So I think the fact that like the best idea kind of wins, focusing on ideas, that is something that will never go out of style, and it's always been a factor in creative work. And that's something that I have been trying to cultivate more and share, and also just like focusing on the fundamentals of craft. And that's something that I feel like I will always be trying to strive for and learn and get better at. It never really goes out of style to work on just like typography, because that's always going to be a thing.
Yeah. But at the same time, though, like, you know, you were talking about the Web3 style.
Mm,
So, the goal is to have a fulfilled life and a fulfilled career. In the umbrella of the Web3 style, probably a lot of like small studios have grown and, you know, become a thing because of that style,
hmm.
right? So it's a mix. Like, yes, for the fundamentals, but like Collins is a great example of this. Solid fundamentals, but every project is a banger because
Yeah.
it's culturally there. Pentagram, same thing. Um, so it's a mix of both. It's like we cannot disregard what I'm saying Web3 because you mentioned this before, but I,
Mhm.
I imagine it's glowy, purple, some nonsense there. Um, it's it's now, or it's maybe 6 months ago, 1 year ago. But yeah, like we can, if we can apply, like Pentagram does this really well, right? Like solid fundamentals, but they always find something culturally and they advance it a little bit.
Hmm.
Like everything they do is just a and this is not a critique. I mean, I'm nobody to critique Pentagram, but like I feel like one impression or interpretation of some of the work is that it's just one step ahead of what's here, but
Mm.
it's not 20 steps. It just feels right. You see it, you're like, oh my god, you guys just took this, generative kind of like pebble thing and just took it 2 notches ahead, and now it looks freaking fresh and brand new. Great job.
Well,
So, yeah, man, I'm so tired.
I,
A lot of talking.
I
I,
wore out Claudio.
I do enjoy it, but my stamina is it's coming down. I'm being honest.
No, that's okay. I mean, as we're winding down here and as
Yeah.
we're getting to the end of our time, I like to pivot to some fun, fast questions.
Oh,
They don't have to be answered fast. I just like to call them that.
let's do it.
Um, but what is one book, movie, or album that has changed you as a person?
Wow. Wow. I might have to think about this one. Yeah, this is not a fast question.
Well, quickly, as you're thinking about it, what is your go-to drink of choice? It doesn't have to be alcohol.
Water.
Nice.
I, no, I I drink socially. Like if I have to drink, I drink and I enjoy it. But I'm not like I don't crave it, and I it's such a I don't think I have mature as an adult. Like I don't do like whiskey on the rocks in my chair at home. Never got there. I'm a water person. I'm from Spain. I should like wine. I don't like wine. Um, if I have to drink alcohol or something, I will get a. I've been doing this for the past few years. It's a Spanish thing. It's called sweet vermouth. Well, I
Mm,
don't know if it's a Spanish thing, but it basically in Spain or Italy, you eat it before a meal, and
mm.
it increases your appetite. And yeah, it's a sunny day. You're sitting in a terrace in a bar or whatever, and you have your sweet vermouth there, about to have lunch. It just feels great.
That
Yeah.
sounds like a dream. With the weather that I have right now, I would love to be in sunny Spain with some sweet vermouth.
Oh no, I would a lot of snow.
We had snow for a couple of days and then it all changed to rain, but it's been like raining for 3 days. So it's just depressing. I'm looking at the sunshine coming through your windows.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. I'm sorry.
all right. That's okay.
All right, one more. Tell me.
Well, do you have an answer for the book, movie, or album, or do you want to go to
Yeah,
something?
I don't have. There's no pivotal moment, I would say, to me in terms of like. I mean, there. It's almost like embarrassing. There are like certain things. Like a friend of mine. This is not my story, but a friend of mine speaks about the first time he listened to this heavy metal band called Iron Maiden,
Oh yeah.
and this guy was coming from like like East Coast rap back then, and when he listens to, I think the song was The Trooper, like he talks about it like something exploded in his mind. It's like something suddenly blew up, and I was like, what is this? um I don't have a moment like that in terms of music. As a kid, like a lot of my upbringing was like reading manga and like
Mm.
Japanese comics. Um, so like, Dragon Ball Z was a big part of my childhood, and like reading, but drawing and watching it, and just it helped me a lot, just develop some sort of a skill set.
Mhm.
Um, but it's like a dumb story. I wouldn't say it's like a, oh my god, like he changed me as a man.
Yeah.
It's all right. It's just the moment in time.
Yeah. What about anime in particular did you find captivating?
Well, the thing about anime is that before anime came to be, I would say, in Europe, the cartoons were pretty. Uh, they were for children.
Mm.
Like there was this infantilized idea of a cartoon, and anime, I think, just brought another dimension. It suddenly brought like bigger, mature stories to audiences. And as a kid, all this content came to me unfiltered, and now
Mhm.
you're going through this struggle of this people against this bad person, and like they have to fight back, or a love story, right? Like there was no depth in love stories before anime, in
Mm.
my experience at least. And suddenly you have this story that is like I don't know, like a love triangle, whatever it was. I don't know. Or I mean, think about Evangelion, right? Evangelion, like there was, or Akira. There was no, Disney didn't have that depth,
Mm-mm.
and you're like, oh my goodness, this is technically it's gorgeous. And then the story, I don't know anyone that watched Akira when they were like 8 years old and understood the plot. You know, what is this about? I don't know, but there's something here, right? Um, so yeah, like Akira probably is one of those that really changed me, because
Mm.
I think it just changed society really.
Yeah.
um yeah,
Beautiful, beautiful piece for sure.
to this day, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have with anime, there's like different tiers of like budget depending on, is it a feature film, is it like one of these like One Piece or Dragon Ball Z or Naruto,
Yeah.
like is it like 200 episodes? um but the iconic kind of like pieces from the 90s, like they're still pretty damn good to this point.
Oh, agreed.
Yeah. Do you watch any anime? Is this something you did as a kid, or you continue?
Yeah, I watched a lot of anime as a kid. I don't watch a ton now. I was
Same.
rewatching Cowboy Bebop, but
Hmm.
I didn't make it all the way through, not just because I'm always distracted and tend to kind of focus on things off the screen at nighttime, like reading, etc. But I think that again, that's from the 90s. But Cowboy Bebop, I think, is amazing. I really liked Yu Yu Hakusho
Oh
as
wow.
a kid. That was a really good one. Acura is really great. Even Jellion's really good.
Mhm.
But I think it's just like the stories are really captivating. The action is
Mhm.
really cool. I thought like Gundam Wing, as when I was a kid, I thought was like the most amazing thing ever. I wanted to like pilot a robot, and I was like, I should go in the military. By the time I'm old enough, there'll be robots. No, but I guess in different forms.
Talking recently, in this period of like, let's get out of my bubble a little bit. I was talking to the one of my kids' friends, older sibling, and this is like a 17-year-old person. I'm like, oh, you watch anime? And I asked, what do you watch? And they're like, oh, I just finished Demon Slayer and Psyche. So Psyche is an anime that if you can, it's kind of like a fun anime to watch,
Mm.
especially with kids. But then I tried this Demon Slayer, and I couldn't watch it. I watched like 5 episodes in the background at night, and I was like, I'm not the right age for this anymore. I think this is meant for someone much younger. Like the whining and like I cannot do this. I was like, this is not for me. I cannot do this anymore. I done my time. Um, so yeah, I'm with you. Like now I'm watching One Piece with my kids.
Mm.
So we're like episode 96. Jesus Christ. Um,
Well, you got like 1,400 more to go.
exactly. No, every night it's like after dinner, if no need for shower or anything, like we watch a couple of episodes, and yeah, it's fun. It's fun. Like it's fun to live it through them, I would say.
Mm.
But I wouldn't stop my life now to watch One Piece, of course.
People love it. Like
Yeah,
it's like
fresh.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a One Piece guy myself. I haven't taken the plunge.
No, I me neither, right? Like to me, like I saw it, but I skipped it, and suddenly it's like, oh my god, this thing has been going on for many years. But now I was like, oh, pirates, boats.
Yeah.
Well, let's give it a shot, and they enjoy it. So it's fun to live it through them, I guess.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Last
What
question.
about you? Tell me. Oh, sorry, I was going to ask you about your book.
Oh, what books?
No, what is your answer to the question?
Oh my gosh. So it's funny. I had mentioned when I answered this question a few weeks ago, it was Iron Maiden as an example. Like I saw them. It was my second concert. I saw them live. It was when I was graduating 8th grade. It was the album where Eddie the Zombie is on the tank. I forget what it's called. But to answer this question, so let me think of a fresh answer. Because usually I go with music. So maybe I'll try to think of a film that changed me. I would say film or Okay, so this can tie into anime and we'll keep it in this world because my grandmother was the first person that introduced me to Miyazaki. And the first 2 films that she gave me to watch were Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke. And I felt that the action sequences in Princess Mononoke were absolutely stunning, but it also had this beautiful storytelling aspect to it. And it showed me that there could be kind of tying in, because this was before I saw like Akira and all that. It showed that there could be darker stories and more life lessons than just like the bubblegum stuff that was on like Toonami or like even Adult Swim. It had depth. It had this core concept. And now I can see like that is very much a fundamental built-in through line of all of Miyazaki's films. But I think it really showed that there could be more, and it got me really interested in the aspect of like filmmaking and like the hero's journey. And that's something that I think about within any kind of work that I'm doing. Is like, what's the story? Who are the characters? I frame things with product design in particular is like, what is the villain we're fighting? How does the hero conquer that villain? How do we use that kind of marketing speak to try to showcase a story that is kind of going through the process of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey and kind of pushing the user into the perspective of being that hero, being pushed to the product to solve their kind of guiding problems. And then ultimately they have to come to their decision to on their own. But I think that kind of sparks something in the storytelling aspect. And I try to bring that into a lot of the world building and brand building that I do currently. So I'd say that is one that fundamentally did change me in how I think.
Yeah, and now to add to this, the soundtrack of Princess Mononoke, it's gorgeous. It's one of the best. Like, you had like all these like cheapish kind of like tunes in anime, and suddenly like Miyazaki always works with the same like composer is Joe Hisaishi, and every movie is like the soundtrack, it just hits you right. And I do still, of all the movies, I do still remember the Princess Mononoke soundtrack. It was really good.
Well, I think that's the thing is like, there's so many other elements that can evoke the emotion. It's not just visual. We really do need to try to think of work that touches on a multi-sensory scale because they trigger different bits of nostalgia for different people. So like, I'm sure that if you smell a certain particular flavor group or profile, it sends you right back to Spain. I'm sure tasting certain wines bring you back to different periods of your life, or it can be the same thing with sounds. And I think that if we can trigger certain cues and trigger on touches of nostalgia, then it just like kind of bolsters and emboldens our work and makes it even more powerful.
Yeah. You probably have seen the show Mad Men. that classic carousel presentation of the nostalgia, and it's like he's showing photos of his life. Just beautiful. Yeah, I agree. It's always like take a step back to go like 100 steps forward.
Yeah.
Like you cannot just go forward if you don't acknowledge and maybe bring an anchor from the past that people can relate to. Um, I don't know if you've been following like the whole debate, but like the Rabbit AI right now, like this device came out designed by Teenage Engineering, but it's its own company, and they sold like 60,000 devices in like 2 weeks or something. Is they've done incredible, and essentially it's not that different from the product that Humane
Mm.
has been working on, this pin as well, that you have access to ChatGPT and all this. And one of them is getting a lot of criticism and the other one is not. And I tend to think that it's almost like one had to come before, just to create the awareness, so the second one could be successful. And it's just a shame that it's a different company. It should have been the same company getting the critique, but then getting the reward. Uh, but I do feel like if the successful one, this Rabbit R1, will have come first, probably will have gotten a lot of critique that this other company has gotten. I don't know what this means in terms of sales or anything, but it's interesting that the discourse around each company and how they're being portrayed, by outlets and people on social and all that.
It definitely is interesting. Sometimes it can be a blessing or a curse to be first.
I don't know in terms of like brand and design, how I don't know if there's a brand so hated. What would you say is a brand that is deeply hated by by customers or by the community?
I think like any internet provider, like everyone hates all like their service providers. Like
Yeah,
everyone hates Verizon, everyone hates Comcast. That's for
yeah,
some reason an industry that like we can always find ways to bitch and moan.
yeah. Airlines too.
Yeah.
Like there was a commercial this other day, like, oh, United now all flights have a monitor in the back, and I'm like, God damn it, United! Like you have deeper problems than monitors in the back. It's just so bad. But yeah, it's not quite the same example though. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like for the Humane versus Rabbit, I think you're right. Where just like people had to like see it, not understand it, hate it, and then another thing was able to
To
kind of,
hit it.
yeah. And I don't know if anything necessarily changed. Maybe it was their marketing, maybe it was the perception that the brand is putting out. Humane has a different vibe than Rabbit. Rabbit feels younger and it feels like it's for like a certain demographic of people. Like I don't know how I use that in my day-to-day life, and I don't think I'm the target, but like because I don't use like Chat GPT like to answer questions like in general, but
Yeah. Oh, that actually a question for you though. So like what tools have you integrated in your toolkit this past few years that this past year that you didn't have before?
I'm in talks with like some companies for AI podcast editing.
Oh wow.
And I think that could be interesting. But the thing is, like, I kind of like slicing and dicing it up. And like, I almost need to like train it specifically. Like, I could do this with a human. I would just film on Loom or some screen recording tool and just like literally annotate everything and why I'm doing it. And then I could teach a human how to think the way I'm thinking. Maybe I
Right.
could do that the same way with like an AI, but like it has to have the personality and the snap. And it's never going to make like music choices the way that I make them. And maybe that could be like try to teach it, but I think it's like you need the human touch. But like in terms of like something that could like cut up timelines and like shrink things and cut out ums and ahs, beautiful. That's great. That's a perfect tool to integrate. It saves time. It's not like work that I want to do. I think anything like that that doesn't refine, well, that doesn't like take away from the craft is like the
Yeah.
thing I really like.
Basically, I agree with you. Like anything that takes away the busy work.
Mm-hmm.
Busy work is not good. Like and like that no human should be thinking about and scanning this video looking for that. But anything that, just to, I'm kind of like rephrasing what you said, like anything that leans on your creative perspective doesn't have to be replaced. I mean, what's the point?
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't, I mean, this past year, I would say like ChatGPT, I would say, has become like a destination that I didn't have before. And it's not so much, I think it's not so much a replacement of Google, it's just a different service that I didn't know it existed before, you know? Like I'm not going to like give me a list of restaurants around me to ChatGPT. It's more like specific questions, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think probably like the, you know how like your deepest secrets now exist in the list of chats with ChatGPT, like the dumb questions you didn't think of asking. Now they're
Yeah.
all there, and those are things that you cannot. I mean, you could search for them in Google, I guess, but it's a different thing. It's not so much a replacement for me, in a weird way.
The summary aspect, I think, is nice if you wanted like one specific thing, like just to like churn through and you're not clicking on multiple different web pages or browsers. But I think that aspect, it can be helpful. I mean, like, yeah, you can ask it to do certain things. I'm sure it's like more helpful like for a developer if they're just looking for a single result instead of going on like different forums or looking for one specific thing. Like in my day-to-day life, I don't find that I use it too much. Maybe there's more ways that I can incorporate it that I haven't tried.
Yeah. All right. What was the next question?
Last question is, what is something outside of the world of design that you are really into right now?
That is a great question. And this is a no answer so far. I guess a couple of things. So I don't know if this is an age thing, but every year I'm trying to invest time out of But the problem with design in my experience is that it started as a hobby and became a job. So the problem here is that you could still to this day have it as a hobby and as a job, and that is a bad place to be, because it's a lot of a lot of computer, a lot of doing the same thing. And I've done that for many years, and only in the past few years I'm like starting to like understand that this is something I do enjoy, and I do it still as a hobby, but I'm trying to branch out as much as I can. Which is, I'm not branch out completely, but I'll tell you. So well, I have two kids, so somebody said I don't have hobbies, I have kids, so that was that's a big time sucker or investment. I am in the process of learning how to play that thing.
Nice.
So that music in general has been a thing that I've been always curious, but I never really invested time. I'm not good at it, but I also have gotten to a realization that the only thing I need is time. So if you do something every day a little bit, eventually you're gonna get better at it. And once you understand that, there's no frustration. You just every day you do it a little bit. I would say working on my own health. I never paid too much attention to it for the past year or so. Like I've gone a bit more like crazy in the just doing the strength exercises and whatnot. So I'm like year and a half in this journey, and so far feel much better and feel healthy, and all that's great. And the last thing is a project for this year. I don't know if this is going to work out, but I'm going to start studying to get this license for how to say, this is a Spanish thing, basically to be able to drive this boat of a certain size.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I think in the US, as far as I've researched, you actually don't need any license.
What size of the boat?
So there are two I call it titles that I'm interested in. One is up to 15 meters long. What is that in feet?
So 15 meters, so that would be 15 times 3, like, right? Because a meter is 3 feet.
It's like a more or less kind of thing.
Yeah, so like 45-foot kind of boat.
So
more,
49. So one
yeah,
license is up to 49, and the other one I might start is like up to like 27 feet.
nice.
Um, so it's silly. It's not like my family. My stepdad, he used to fix boats,
Hmm.
so I grew up with with him like fixing always a boat, and then they will like get rid of it, and then he will start fixing another one. So it's being a latent part of my life that I really enjoy, but I never like he had all these licenses. He can drive like massive boats, but I never really put the time on it. So I'm like, what if I just study this book, take this freaking couple of tests, and like give it a shot, just for fun.
Hell yeah.
Yeah,
Boats are very fun.
yeah. Without I don't have any aspirations of like crossing the Atlantic Ocean or anything, which people sometimes do. Like it's more like recreational, like
Hmm.
just yeah, mess around. Yeah. How about yourself?
Outside of design, so I am going to sign up for this pottery class.
Yeah.
So that'll be starting in
Fun.
March. So I'm going to do that. It's something I've wanted to do for a while, and I get busy and I forget to do things for myself.
I know. I know. No, that's what it is. Yeah.
And so that's what I'm trying to change in 2024 is just do more things off the screen for myself and get out of the house. So I'm going to do that because I'm really into physical crafts. So I want to like make these beautiful, like high walled uh, bowls, like plate bowls, like salad bowls, I guess. That's what I really would like to try and make. But the process itself, I think spinning the wheel, getting messy, and like just throwing clay, I think that sounds like super fun to me. Playing with like glazes to change colors opposed to just like using the eyedropper tool sounds like pretty exciting.
No control C.
Yeah, exactly. I can't fix it. It's in the kiln. It's fired. There's nothing I can do.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's I saw recently this photo. I think kind of the all hands that you go back in your hard drive and look for photos, and it was basically my setup, but like 15 years ago. And
Mm.
I'm looking at like this CRT display, like this HP laptop, and I had like some food on the left, and I saw it and I was like, oh my god, this is a lifetime sitting down in front of some sort of like screen setup with food. I'm eating in front of how sad is that? And it made me sad. I gotta be honest, it made me sad. It made me like, whew, like we gotta look for hobbies here.
Well, I had that realization too. I'm just like, damn, I need to like go on walks with other people besides myself. Like I need to
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
I need an office or something or a co-working space. I need to like be around more people.
I know this guy who recently got into playing pinball,
Oh,
and
nice.
but I didn't know. He's telling me about this, and I'm like, this is crazy. There's a whole like fan base of pinball, and there's like a global chart of like ranking of pinball players, and a
Wow.
license board, and it's a whole world. And he said something that I was like, wow, this is amazing. He's like, there's no other way in which I could have met or become friends with this guy, and he's a mailman. Like, you're totally right. Like, what is the third space where it's not about your work, it's not about your house, your family, where you can be appreciated. And yeah, you have a developer, and his best friend now is a mailman, and that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think hobbies are a very easy way to bring people together with a shared interest. So you'd never
yeah,
meet them otherwise.
right. Yeah, no, pinball, man. Honestly, I was, you never take that one. I never took that seriously, but there's a massive pinball community. I didn't even think about it's a thing. And I imagine just like with every other niche, right? It's always like this buckets of people that are really into this one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like subcultures, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. That sounds healthy. I'm happy for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, I guess we are winding down. we're coming to a close. Claudio, is there any last words that you would like to share with the audience? Any wise words, any products that you want to promote, anything at all?
No promotion. I mean, Opal Camera, give it a shot. It's great. We worked pretty hard on it. Words of wisdom, I guess. No, nothing groundbreaking. Hopefully, if someone was able to go through, the long podcast, they will get their own conclusions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say, we're in a journey together, everybody. So let's just have fun.
We're all on a journey. We're all legendary, and we have an amazing story of our own. So on that journey, take the time to be kind, to grind, and unwind. Do something off the screen for yourself, and let's make the world a better and more creative place to live. Claudio, legend, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brita. Thank you so much.